being here, and for those of you who just stepped in, I'm going to try to compact in 45 minutes what I believe to be a wealth of information that may be very useful in your practices. My background, I've been in the field of psychology and counseling for over 40 years, right? I'm in my 6th decade of life, and I graduated from the IIQTC on 11/11 in 2011. I also had the beautiful experience of going to China with Roger in 2013. And what I've created for you guys is, I believe, some material that will help you with marketing from a medical perspective. We're going to use the IIQ's embodied practices, but from a standpoint of proactive participation in our healthcare. And I have a background in the healthcare profession, and I have and in counseling and in psychotherapy. I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist fundamentally, with many, 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 many other kinds of training. So I'm an eclectic mess of all kinds of wonderful things. And my passion is to help lay people understand why we want to do these things. Not only the how and what it is, but why it's so important. And I believe that the why, oftentimes in my classes, is the calling card for people, in their words, to be able to bring their friends in, which is what happens for me. They're like, oh my gosh, my friend needs to be here. She's got the heart thing, or she's got the posture thing, or she suffers with depression, or she suffers with anxiety. So in everything that I teach, I always teach at least an hour-and-a-half class. I charge an hour fee for an hour and a half because I want an hour of movement, and I want to give them gold nuggets throughout of some of the educational stuff. And for me, that is part of, I think, what helps empower people. I use this, I always leave, this is a marketing thing, I always leave, and if you don't have this yellow card, make sure you grab one, but it is the Integral Qigong, the Vitality Enhancement Methods, and the 9 phases. And it's got Dr. Yonka's work and books and how to access all of that, and the website. And the very bottom one has my information, how to find me. On the back side of this is a link to my free wellness materials. And as a psychotherapist, and in the world that we live in, there's huge issues with addiction. And all of this on here is free. I want you to hear it. Nobody has to give me their email address. I don't even know that people are pulling stuff down. But I want you to understand the tool that I've created. There's a thing on addiction and recovery. A lot of people are struggling with that today. It's actually rapidly increasing with the power of the drugs and the availability and the advent of all of this technology and social media. It's activating the brains of young children very early. So we are seeing a higher incidence of addiction. So, and I'm talking about that at the reunion, but there's a whole thing on this and how to get help in the intervention process. It's beautiful. What we focus on in the IIQTC is basically the life balance and health. That's this section, and there's a link here, which when I'm teaching medical Qigong and Tai Chi, there's a link called Medical Qigong and Tai Chi, and it's got a link to many of the great resources, a lot of our grads, to the IIQTC, to the evidence-based research, so they can explore more on their own if they want to know more. The books, Roger's books. So, and the reason I say this is because I believe we can all develop tools where people can take a piece of paper at the end of class and they can begin to say, oh, here, I have it, and share it with other people. And I believe that is part of the roots that start to grow out for other people. The rest of my website is for those people struggling with psychological stuff, which you know when you ground people in their body, all of a sudden this emotional energy body sometimes in a chaotic way starts to merge. There's tools in here of going inward and clearing the energy of the past, reframing, introject psychological beliefs. This is the internal piece. And then I always say, you know, we can't fully show up for life if we've got an addiction focusing outside of ourselves. If we're not balanced, if we don't have the inside cleared out, we're not really ready to be fully present in a relationship with another human being. And that's the last section, is healthy relationships. So there's a wealth of information. I'm a writer, that's what I do also, that are tools, I believe, that add to this practice. And so that's kind of what we're going to do today, is embody the thing that I sell. So I'm here to talk about medical Qigong. I use that word. I am a holistic health advisor and a corporate wellness coach, so I do have certifications that allows me to use things, and I am in the holistic health field, and I'm a licensed counselor. I use the word medical Qigong, and the thing that I stress is proactive participation in our healthcare. The language that I use is improving balance, increasing energy through breath practices, increasing immune functions, optimizing our health, improving our posture and postural alignment. I'm a real big stickler with how we carry our energy, because I do believe that shifts our psyche also, not just in our practices, but in the world. You know, we talk about energy here. It improves focus and concentration, and it changes our brainwave states, literally shifts our brain from beta to alpha, inducing the relaxation response, which you all know then optimizes our immune function. Our immune system does not operate as well in a beta state, which is what you're listening to me in, is that beta frequency. That's how we gather information. When we drop ourselves down into the relaxation mode, which is what Qigong and Tai Chi does, it shifts our brain wave from beta to alpha, which optimizes our immune function. I believe that our bodies are smarter than us. Okay, you know that when you get sick, if you don't listen, you think you're kind of getting something, you keep going, what does your body eventually do? Knocks you out, you end up in bed. You know, and then I listen to people beat themselves up because they're in bed. I'm like, your body knows exactly what to do. But had we pay attention before it started to break itself down and had to knock us off our feet, we might not have gotten to that point. So my whole thing, and as a Gestalt psychotherapist, is self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-empowerment. And that's pretty much what we're doing in medical Qigong, okay? My logo is that symbol. It is, and I'm using this to implant psychologically the principles in your brain in a way that it makes sense, I believe, for lay people. Think of it as a pyramid. The base of that pyramid, all of us energetically, is our self-care. It is our integrative mind-body practices that we're going to talk about how they shift. It is our connection to not only ourself, in first chakra of yoga, grounding, our connection to ourself, but it's also our connection to people and our support systems, okay? So that whole base of that picture of my logo is from a psychological point of view. I teach my clients that is what we're going to focus on, is that whole piece of how they take care of themselves. What are they doing to increase their own life force energy? And the integrated practices are a part of it. And who's in their life, okay? Because if I'm not and then, I'll say it this way, and then when we do that, this is that energy we talk about. The passion for life, the joy for living, that whole life force energy as we root and are grounded, which is what our practices teach us. Our passion for life, our joy, which is our gift, pops, and our third eye opens up where we see clearly, what do I want to move towards? What do I want to move away from? Okay? And that is the whole martial arts. Our whole center from our postural alignment moves us towards or away from in a very fluid way. And it's the same in the principles of psychology. As we ground into our own self-care and we're rooted with good people and community, it's not an isolated thing. When the wind shifts and I'm rooted and I know the elements of flow, I flow through the chaos, the tragedies of life. If I'm not rooted in self-care, because my brain perhaps is dysregulated, as in addiction, depression, anxiety, and we're going to talk about the body practices with that. If I'm dysregulated and I'm not hooked up to people, when energy hits us in life and things don't go well, or life itself happens, which is part of life, what happens to me? I fall over, right? I'm going to collapse. So the beauty of Qigong and Tai Chi, which is why I fell in love with it, I had already embraced the principles of ground and embodied consciousness, all right? Paying attention, becoming self-aware, taking responsibility for that which I became aware of, you know, the things I needed to change, like put down the alcohol, etc., etc., because it was blocking my ability to see clearly and function to my optimal. So when I would stop and become self-aware, then I had to take responsibility for the things that started to merge. And in our classes, you better believe that as we start to root people in their bodies, pull their breath back down, that stuff's going to start to come up. And if we understand and we don't fear it, we will also mirror them not to fear it, but to take responsibility with appropriate resources, healthcare practitioners, to go and have someone witness what is coming up. That is not our job as a Qigong teacher. Okay? The principles of psychology and healing often, I believe, are I see you, I hear you, I'm here for you. I'm not going to do it for you, but I will hold a space while you allow that energy in motion, that emotion, to merge through you. And as clinicians, whether it be a yoga instructor or a Qigong and Tai Chi, when we start to hook them up, because a lot of people are not hooked up to themselves, you better believe that the energy of the middle dantian, the emotional energy body, is going to start to shake them up. And the beauty of this practice is when we take them back down to this practice and root them back into themselves, they can learn not to fear the wind, because they are beginning to develop, as so those of you who are in my class, that support system. I always, in the beginning of my classes, do what I'm going to teach you right now and tell you why. Neuroscience. Want you to look around and greet someone and say good afternoon, and use their name if you know it. I like to start that way. And what just happened to your faces when we did that?
Smile.
You smiled. And what happened in your brains?
Endorphins.
You increase the dopamine. The neurotransmitters, the feel-good drugs, occur when you look at someone and you greet them and you pause and you breathe that in. Okay? When we're doing this and connecting through technology, okay, what is increased in our bodies?
Stress. Cortisol?
Cortisol, because why? What else is increased? Adrenaline is increased, and when adrenaline is increased, yes, the cortisol rushes to the muscles, which eventually causes aches and pains. The adrenaline's increased, the pancreas has to activate to kind of help balance that whole rush that the person just got. And then we start, because those organisms, those endocrine things were not made for constant hits, right? It wasn't. They were made for the saber-toothed tiger in primitive days to activate, to shoot the cortisol to our muscles, to run like crazy out of or fight off the enemy. Well, now what's happening is the technology we've created is literally keeping people hyped up on adrenaline, okay? And it's shooting the brain from a regular beta mode that you're listening to me in to a higher frequency beta. And so what's happening to so many people, not just the younger generation, but adults, when they start to shift their brain back down to beta or try to relax, what do they think? Something's wrong. Because they're liking that spin. They're losing contact with themselves instead of dropping down into the alpha mode, which is the relaxation response, and being quietly content, finding peace within themselves. We're getting a lot of people in this agitated state that when they're comparing themselves to the higher levels of adrenaline rush. So when they start to shift down, they believe that something's wrong. And the tragedy is people aren't learning how to get back to self. Okay? We're losing the art of that. And this practice, medical Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, all of these integrative mind-body health disciplines are bringing us back home to ourself through a vessel of embodied practice and consciousness. Because we're losing that slowly. Like I said, we're activating the dysregulation, the structural dysregulation in the brain of addiction, and we're activating all kinds of neurological disorders as a result of some of this frenetic energy. And people are forgetting what it's like to pause. And as we've learned all week, it's in those pauses, it's in those periods where we're not afraid to be. We boost that light of consciousness, we turn it around on ourselves, and we feel peace. And that peace that we can access through these practices are far more powerful than any of the mood-altering things I ever took in my younger years. Far more powerful. And to me, it is a tragedy that we're not teaching people how to get back to themselves and the wisdom of our own body. So again, the principles: self-awareness, self-responsibility, self-empowerment. So as we invite them into class, as we show them structurally how to drop down into their body, as we give them the tools and the links to resources, okay, and homework. I'm really good about giving homework. This is what I want you to practice this week. We are empowering them to come back home to themselves and for them to be a vessel of light also in the world. You know how we say we are training thousands of teachers to actually help millions of people heal. And that's kind of and research is supporting this. We're moving into an era of functional medicine, and I'll just be real quick, which is now writing prescriptions for lifestyle management. And part of the lifestyle management are the integrative mind-body practices. And that's a word we use in healthcare and in the research world. It's a piece of the language, integrative mind-body health practices. And the integrative mind-body health practices are helping balance the brain in many, many ways. And Qigong and yoga and Tai Chi are a part of that. And I want to explain just a little bit about it in the brain functioning. We have two hemispheres of the brain, the linear, the left, the right, and there's all kinds of things that both of them do. But we have, if you remember, for those of you who are old enough, and some of you aren't, but when we were young, we were told to go outside and play. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And when you went outside and play, how long did you stay out there? All day long, right? I mean, I didn't want to come home. I can still hear the dinner bell, in my head of when it was like, oh no. All right, so tell me something. What did we have in our backpack when we ran outside and played?
Zero.
Nothing. We didn't have backpacks. We had no technology. We had no backpacks. Right? We had nothing. And we had each other, we had nature, we had exploration. That was the right brain primarily, the connection to people, to all of that. All right? The right brain in school systems, art, band, music, all that. The right brain development stuff is slowly getting squashed out. And technology, which is a lot of left brain, is superseding, and so we're becoming imbalanced, right? Where Qigong and Tai Chi does is it integrates us back into the balance, okay? From the postural alignment. And the right and left brain, so that you can see this, we have two hemispheres of the brain. When you cross a large muscle over your midline, okay? Any kind, in the old days we called it brain gym, okay? And I always do these kind of practices also. I'll say grab some, joy from the heavens and put it in your heart. Any kind of crossing over your large muscle over your midline helps the lights fire in both sides of the brain, okay? Americans have a lot of linear cardio stuff, okay? And so we do a lot of rote cardio, which cardio is excellent, but it's the integrative practices, especially Tai Chi, where we're moving every part of our body in a different direction at the same time that literally pops open the brain and creates new pathways. Why is that important in America? Because of our cardio emphasis and activities, heart disease has decreased in the year 2000, since 2000, by 14%. And this is the new statistics that's going to scare you to death. What has increased since then that has to do with our brain? Dementia and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's has increased in America since the year 2000 by 89%.
Oh my God.
89%. We know it's a human tragedy and about to wipe us out from a healthcare perspective. Okay? Because most of the people caring, they say by the time you're 85, all right? If you want to look to your right and look to your left, just look to your right and look to your left, okay? 3 people, right? By the time you're 85, if you make it to 85, one of you will have Alzheimer's. One of you will be absolutely exhausted trying to care for the other one that has Alzheimer's because we have a healthcare system so far that's not paying for it. Almost all the dollars come out of people's pockets, and you all know that, right? If you have parents that's had dementia or Alzheimer's. And the other person will be friendless because this one doesn't know you and this one's too tired to get together, right? Because it's a tragedy what's happening. So the integrative Qigong and Tai Chi from a medical perspective is literally keeping, not only stretching the neuroplasticity in our brain, but keeping it alive. We are the ones that is going to have our minds and know each other, okay? And it's all part of that, and there's evidence-based in it. It's one of the #1 things they're seeing now is the integrative stuff that's helping keep the brain and reduce the onset of dementia and the onset of Alzheimer's and the progression of both. They say that we can reverse the dementias and Alzheimer's with integrative mind-body practices. Okay, so it's all the more reason I love working with seniors who are really wanting to stay healthy and alive and all of that. So it's a huge piece. So remember, we're shifting the brain down to help people not blow out the adrenal pancreas, because I wanted to say before I got off on that other tangent, what happens when your adrenal pancreas, because we're overworking them constantly throughout the day. What happens eventually? Inflammation occurs, and what happens after that? Adrenal fatigue. But what happens? When you start to wear out your adrenal pancreas operation, what happens? Diabetes. What's the second #1 thing of death in this country? Diabetes. 100 years ago, we did not have childhood diabetes. Today we do. Because we're wearing out the adrenal pancreas. They weren't made. They're not a muscle that can be stretched and relaxed. They're small organs that were used for the flight or fight. And we're overusing them, and we're over-flushing, putting cortisol in our muscles instead of inducing the choline-based transmitters. We are flooding our body with the cortisol. Okay. So let's go back to the ground. People with depression, anxiety, addiction-prone, eating disorders, a lot of people, they have a structural, not all of those people with that, but a lot there's a structural deregulation going on in the brain that pulls them, like with anxiety disorders. If you ever notice anybody with anxiety, they're pulling their energy up, you'll watch their body, their head goes up and they just spin. And they're searching for the answer out there. They're just spinning. They're not in their body. Okay? So the good thing about Qigong, when I see a lot of people who walk in, and their head's up and their shoulders back, and I can tell they're disconnected from themselves, I really make sure my voice is softer. Our voice is magnetic. Okay? I mean, there's a hypnotism to a lot of it. I pull my voice down and I really focus with addiction and depression and anxiety and grounding their feet. And the technique I use is, I say, I want you to feel your feet on the floor. Take a deep breath. Notice your hands. Take a deep breath. And I'm kind of talking through these faster. but I try to teach them to get out of there, whether it's chasing the cigarette or the drink or the fear, okay? Or the thought of, I'm so depressed I can't do this, right? I try to bring them back home to themselves and get them to feel their feet. Because the goal in psychological things is I need to be able to move away from the things that are too much pressure. I need to move towards the people that feed my soul. I need to release the people that are dragging me down, okay? And so what we want to do is, you know, with the when we do the 3 intentful corrections, I always kind of stress, feel my big toe, my little toe, the ball of my foot, the heel, and I you know, just kind of wiggle our feet and place our energy into our feet. Sometimes, depending on the group, I'll tell them to walk, and this is something I learned from my studies with Thich Nhat Hanh. I love this. He always would say, kiss the earth with every step you take. And he, you know, just walks with such a grace. And if you look at the energy fields, you know, when we pull our energy from out of there down into here, we've talked a lot about vibration. Vibrational energy does radiate out. And our energy fields can impact with our voice, just our motions, our eyes, our presence, can impact not only our classes, but our walk in life and in the world. So helping people really not just focus on the chi ball, you know, and quickly doing the feet. I really stress grounding the feet and taking a breath and moving back and forth. Some of you guys did it beautifully when you were doing your exercises. And another thing I oftentimes will do is I'll tell people, if I know that their brain spins or they're having trouble quieting, is to visualize the white light and just dripping all the way down into their toes and feet and rooting them to the earth and watching it. Because there's some people who are auditory and love your voice, and there's some people that want the image. So I will use the image of the white light dropping down, and then I keep them focused on their hands and their feet. I've worked in my practice of psychology in a lot of trauma victims, and trauma victims keep reenacting trauma, and they do not live in their body, and they can't get out of the spin, and they oftentimes collapse. And what I like, that's why with especially people with past trauma, PTSD, men and women who were in war, people who had victims of incest or rape or some kind of other life tragedy, what happens is they had to freeze, they became immobilized. And so when and they couldn't use their feet or their hands. You know, an incest victim, they can't push their perpetrator away because there was some threat going on. Either they were too small and the other person was too big. So when you're going like this, or you're going like that, and we're activating those receptors in the brain, sometimes memories get triggered. But if we've already taught them to get back to self and stay in their feet and stay in their hands, we electively teach them how to use their breath to feel the calm in their center. And I use my hands a lot to tell people to put you can say lagoon, but the hands right here and the hands right here, and feel your feet on the floor and come back home to your center. I believe that, you know, teaching people how to see, feel, embody their own body helps empower them no matter what their history is. And you know how we teach in IIQTC, we're taking the past and the future and we're merging it into the present. And my whole thing with self-empowerment is using these practices as a way to keep us not just with our head, our minds in the present moment, but our full body in the present moment, dropping back down into self so that we can move away or call a friend or wrap up in a blanket and cry if something happened. The central nervous system, when we release trauma, it shakes it out of our body, and it scares people who aren't used to that. And the body disciplines, the integrative stuff, does shake that stuff up. And I always just say bless whatever's happening, trust the process, and allow their body to release the energy of the past through emotion, energy and motion. And I'll say, I don't want, after a class, for them, you know, to look to me. I mean, sometimes people, we don't have that, but to say, you know, do you have a friend to call? I want you to go home and I want you to wrap up in a blanket, and I encourage you call. And I always ask for their first name. What's your friend's first name, or friends' names? I want you to call Linda. I want you to call Bob. You know, we're just kind of stirring up your central nervous system, and it's okay. It's a good thing because it's something that can be released. Just pay attention to it. If they have a therapist, I encourage them to contact that. But the key is to really emphasize that body grounding. And I'm going to talk a bit about the breath. Somebody asked me if I would repeat it because I did this the other morning. The deep breathing, I'll put one hand here and one hand here. And for older populations, we do this sitting, and in some of my classes, because remember I said I always ask for an hour and a half, even though I'll charge an hour's class price. I want an hour and a half so I can have more time to teach. I always give my classes little nuggets. I'm giving you a bunch, but a little here and a little here. And so they're always learning more about their own health care. And one of the things I love to do is I stress the grounding. I also stress the breathing. And I say, put one hand here and put one hand here. And if you all do that, if you don't have anything in your hand and you want to try it, and you close your eyes, pay attention to take 3 deep breaths and pay attention to what hand or hands move. Okay. Did the top one or the bottom one move? The bottom one is the one for optimal, you know, I'm not saying correct, for optimal performance of energy in our bodies. The bottom hand should have risen and the top one not when you're taking deep breaths. Okay? And there's on my website, AnnetteFranks.com, there's wonderful breathing exercises and body awareness exercises under the button Learning to Live in the Present Moment. It's on your card, it's on there, and it's all free. I always give that to my clients. But explain a little bit. We pull in oxygen to then, and this is the simple layman's thing, but we pull in oxygen to then feed, it goes through our lungs, it's oxygenated, it goes into the cells, and it's carried through our blood to every cell in our body. And what is the organ that carries it to every cell in the body? The heart. The heart has to pump the blood, okay? When we pull in deep breaths, we know today that most of the oxygenation occurs in our lower part of our lungs. But yet we live in a culture that it's about 65% occurs down here. So the best, oxygenation occurs in the lower lobes. Yet we live in a culture that primarily, if you watch most people's breathing, they've got their head up, shoulders back, and they're shallow breathers, which means they're not pulling in optimal amount of oxygen per breath, which is why they have more heartbeats and more breaths per minute. They're not pulling in enough oxygen per breath, which makes them tired, okay? And it also makes what work harder? Heart. And what's the #1 cause of death in America? Heart. And again, we've created a medical system in the past, not functional medicine doctors and integrative doctors, but allopathic doctors have been trained to what? If you go in with heart issues, what is one of the primary prescriptions? Boy, you guys got some good doctors. We oftentimes will medicate for high blood pressure, versus tell them to go home and belly breathe. In the old school day, if a doctor told you to go home and belly breathe, which we know shifts the whole operation of the system and causes the heart to not have to work so hard, if we were given that prescription, then the medications would not have been written in so many prescriptions. But they weren't trained, as we know today, functional medicine doctors, integrative health doctors, more people are teaching us to slow down. More people are writing prescriptions for the integrative, the Tai Chi, the yoga, the exercise than ever before. We are shifting, and it's beautiful to me. But the thing that you want is when you're breathing shallow and people aren't breathing correctly, some people don't know that they're not breathing deep. They'll go like this. And they're filling their top portion. So they're getting more air in those lungs, but they're still not using the most optimal part of the lungs, okay? So on my website, there's a thing, but I'll describe it to you. I tell people to lay on their belly in the morning or at night, put a book or a box of Kleenexes and practice, and it will feel weird for shallow breathers, but practice pushing it up and down before they get out of bed. And they can do it at night before they go to sleep or in the middle of the day. But you have to make conscious the unconscious until it shifts. And then eventually, shallow breathers who shallow breathe all the time will breathe deeply normally, which is what we want. We come into the world, what? Breathing deep or breathing shallow? Deep. Somewhere between infancy and adulthood, we've pulled our energy up and out. And we're operating inefficiently, okay? Same thing with laughter. How many times a day do children laugh? Over 400 times a day.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, when's the last time you counted how many times you laugh, and do you have a support system that makes you laugh? Somehow we've lost the ground of the creative playing and energy outside, and we're pulling our energy up, and now with the advent of technology, we're going even further out of ourselves. You know, when I was a kid, if you wanted to leave, you just kind of created a fantasy. But now, we're going up, and now we can go into other people's fantasies and read all about them forever, right? Okay? So the key is for the integrative is to drop them down and to teach them why. I tell people stick with, I teach a lot of medical Qigong, and then I encourage, I'm a feeder for, because I'm never anywhere once to do 6-week class. So I teach them, and I learn the teachers in my area, and I feed those classes. I teach them why they want to stick with it. Because most people going into a Tai Chi class, if they've never done it, what happens? They get overwhelmed. It's just too much. And there's usually not instruction, nor need there be, in some of them. And so they get lost, they never go back. And so what we do and what I sell is that slow, integrative, mind-body, present moment stuff. I'm going to go on down to...
what's the percent that you mentioned previously about the oxygen exchange in the lower
They say that about 65% of the oxygenation, the powerful, the better part of the engine is in the lower lobes. I don't know how to describe it any more than that. And do research it, because there's a whole lot of information. And if we're not breathing deep, we're not getting the energy that we need. You know, I'm in my 6th decade of life, and I love life, and I have tons of energy, and I wake up feeling joyful, and I'm very clear about what's happening in the world, but I do not let it pull me down. I say, how can I be used today for the good of mankind to wake up our consciousness? And teaching is a huge part of it. Okay, so I want to make sure I give you. Okay, so the neuroplasticity of the brain. You know, I always do this with the eyes open, and I always do this with the eyes closed. And for some of you who are in my class, you know that, okay, when you lift with your heels and you go up, you know, you can do it because you've been doing this for a while. But some, when you do it and you close your eyes, what happened? Start to wobble, okay? And this is an important piece I talk about with structural alignment. When you're starting to wobble, that is a sign that your body is starting to become imbalanced. And what have we been brainwashed in America to believe about balance? What happens when we get old? We're going to lose our balance. We're taught that. That's garbage. Okay, for those of you who went to China, you didn't see walkers, wheelchairs, canes. You saw elderly people empowered and upright and a bundle of energy. Okay? In America, we brainwash people because this is what happens. If you start to fall, okay, when you close your eyes and you do this, and this is evidence-based. I mean, Harvard's done a lot of studies and falls prevention stuff. We're selling this now because it is falls prevention. So I do it with eyes open, eyes closed, which challenges the brain even more. Okay, and a lot of people don't do the eyes closed, but it's really neat because it has to search. But the cool thing is when we do that, we then stay more upright and mobile. When we teach correct posture, which is the stance that Roger has in the book. And I oftentimes, in some of my classes, if they're new students, will run off this picture of, it's in our book, it's part of our teaching tools, of correct posture. And to help people at home remind them, because if their posture is correct from the bottom up, they're going to not get that imbalance. And what happens is in America, if you start to fall, then we tell you, and this is the part that just makes me crazy, we say, buy what? A cane. And the next thing you have to buy is the walker, and the next thing they buy is the wheelchair, the next thing they buy is the push-button bed, and the next thing that they sell you is the coffin. Okay? Those are all commodities, right? We don't have to go out that way, but we have psychologically disempowered ourselves in America that that's the way we go out. And we don't have to do that. Tell them I'm tied up if that's the president's office. Right. No, I do want to talk. Yeah, in my field we have certain things we diagnose. Anyways, so remember to build the brain and to keep us out of wheelchairs and all of that, you know, we have to do the exercises that do it. It's not the same exercises, it's that. So everything we're teaching, I add eyes open and eyes closed. When you have your eyes closed, the brain is reaching out and building even more pathways. So if they've already got it down, I tell them to close their eyes and let's do 3 of those movements with their eyes closed. 1, it helps them feel their body more. 1, it helps them integrate the muscle memory more, but it also is novel, as we've been talking about, for creating more pathways, all right? So that's another little thing to add, eyes open, eyes closed. The postural alignment, if we're starting out, he's gonna get to me any way or another. That's my mom. Oh, that's your mom. All right, tell her I said hi. Anyway, so if we are, if we're kind of doing these and we're not in correct alignment, our bodies will overcompensate in probably not such a good way. So when we really focus on correct alignment, even if somebody says, well, my back is slightly curved or whatever, it's okay. Just visualize, just each time you come back, just visualize stretching just a little bit more. And I have worked with elderly people that, for God's sakes, had these, bigger humps, and I am watching them stand up, okay? There is so much, and part of that is helping them to ground, because you're pulling up from the bottom up, using those muscles, which strengthens then, you see what I'm doing? The whole thing. And it's just like we're a little bit at a time. Same with people who struggle with depression. Just a little more. It's like Gualing's walking. Just a little more, and we're the cheerleader that keeps inviting them to do a little more until they rebalance that brain and repattern the pathways. So postural alignment, and I know, because I've been around doing this for a long time, some people don't stress it, I believe, as well as we could, to really optimize people's health. And the picture and the words are in the manual. Feet shoulder width apart, okay? Tailbone tucked down to the ground. Lengthen the spine. Lengthen the back of the neck. Soften the shoulders. Soften the jaw. I haven't heard that yet this week. Soften the jaw. Okay? Soften the jaw. I always like to say, feel the gold cords rooting you into the earth. Feel the gold cords rooting you, you're suspended from heaven, and visualize the Tai Chi pole. And you know, I had scoliosis. My back, you could see it. My back is beautiful today, and I believe it's because of, you know, these practices of constantly realigning and stretching. And when I was younger, I was a little scared. Oh no, you know, what's going to happen? You know, a lot of my family, you know, they don't walk optimally, you know, and the range of motion is not optimal. And they've allowed that to happen. I'm like, oh, I don't want that. And so these practices with our pelvic bowl and really emphasizing that whole thing not only gives space to the organs and the proper vibratory energy that goes on, but it's also amazing because if we are adjusted on this hip, you know, and we're just kind of the whole body will fight itself to compensate for that. And so we want to start with the ground and really awareness of the thing. So grounding, feet, breath, hands, breath, that's good for helping wire the neurological stuff in the brain. For flowing, I wanted to tell you this because I love this. I didn't think I was going to teach this, so I didn't bring them, or I would have. I have these little ping pong balls, okay? And I put them in their hands for to show them what it's like, because a lot of people, and they don't know what to do, right? You know, that you tell them how to hold their hands, but a lot of them aren't. So I make them do the exercises with their eyes open and eyes closed, ground in their feet, and hold the balls. And I love it, and they love it. Hold the balls. But now I can't say anymore. If you see this anywhere else in the country, you know, you won't see it anywhere else. If you guys do it, you'll see it. You'll see it more. But I teach them to feel and to see how it's held. It's not holding this. It's just laying it there. And that's how I teach, because I'm really a stickler. Ground and then flow. Okay? Because that's what we want, is it to have that fluid motion. And I use ping pong balls, which are so cheap to buy for my classes, and I love that. And then everything, like I do a lot of with the 9 phases or the vitality enhancement. You know, I add the shoulder rotations forward and back and arms out, and I also do the hips because we're, you know, if we don't keep our hips open, we can buy ourselves some bionics later on in life. But quite frankly, the way people talk about it, like it's just the next step in your wellness, is absolutely frightening to me. So I make sure that I ground them and give them those pieces, and we do this, and then I tell them to reverse it, okay? And everything that you do, whether it's arm movements, do it to the right, do it to the left, do it to the left, do it to the right. That balances. And they're just extra little things that actually can make your class longer too. But it's so good for the plasticity of the brain. And everything is disease. You know, we're trying to be proactive. There's energy deficient and energy stagnation. And we're just moving the energy. And that's what I really focus on with that fluid. And I love also giving them the sounds. We live in a very disempowered. A lot of people, and I know you know this because I am not unique and I do classes all over, people don't like to make the sounds at first. You see the hesitation? Yes. We've been taught, we call it retroflexion as a Gestalt psychotherapist, we've been taught to swallow our voices and our words. And so we have consequently a lot of thyroid stuff. And I personally use the sound ah. I have them put their hands here and I make them go Can you feel that? Yes. What's it stimulating? What part of the endocrine system? Thyroid. What also is on the rise? Sluggish, slow thyroids. This is part of vibrational medicine, is this vibrational sound. The really cool thing, because I love studying religions and ancient cultures and practices, the sound ah, many people have speculated, is one of the most powerful vibratory energies we can chant. It is in the sound of almost every culture's name for God, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha, Ra. and almost all of the ancient traditions where they're chanting. But also I believe from an endocrine system, which is where the vibrational energy happens, the sound awe opens up. Helps open up all of that and helps empower them in their voices. Okay, I think I did a lot of that. Okay, the saliva I wanted to add. Saliva when saliva is activated, it starts to carry the digestive enzymes, okay? So when we're picking our food, when we're thinking about washing our food, those saliva glands start to activate, okay? When we put it in our mouth and chew on it, okay, not drink a powdered mix that was, put in a can that doesn't induce the saliva, but, the chewing it activates the saliva glands. The digestive enzyme starts in the thought process, in the preparation, and is activated in the chewing. So when we do swallowing the golden and creating saliva, it's helping activate our digestive enzymes, because a lot of digestive disorders, people are now buying digestive enzymes. Well, if you've had to buy them, they're pretty pricey, because we're not activating our own systems in a way. We've changed our culture so much that we're not living in the system that we're intended. So the saliva activation, slowing things down, I believe really helps empower our people. So, and then I'll be quiet after this. So I do all the flowing motion and all the things that we do. Going back and forth, from right and left and doing this, it moves the spine in ways we don't move it, and it fluffs up. It helps with, what's the little thing in between?
Discs.
And what's in between the discs? The gel-like substance, what's it called? The nucleus pulposa is the little thing. And when we're moving this way, it helps keep that fluffy, okay? And what happens is, if that starts to dry up, what happens to us? We shrink. We shrink. And we're brainwashed to believe we naturally shrink in America.
Oh, you're going to lose a couple of inches.
No, we don't have to. If we're doing certain exercises, okay, to help keep that part of our spine awake and alive and energy flowing through it, we don't have to lose the height that we're brainwashed to believe, okay? And the same with the immune pump, and then I'll be quiet. The immune, because I could talk forever. I do things from an hour and a half to 8 days, so I'm squelching it all into 45 minutes to just kind of give you some little pieces. But the thing that happens here, our immune, we're kind of taught, I was kind of raised, because this is where they only took them out, the lymph nodes they took out here. We have almost 800 lymph nodes throughout our entire body. If you get something toxic or a cancer cell, the nodes closest to that area, a sunspot, puff up because they're activating. Swollen lymph nodes are not a bad thing. Chronic swollen lymph nodes says you're struggling. But a swollen lymph node activates, okay? And it goes into defense to help detoxify, blow out, and push out of your system the toxic cells. That's what it's for. But lymph nodes are activated through pumping. And we don't climb trees, hoe garden, pick vegetables. We don't do that. So we're not moving our bodies in a way that pumps all of the nodes. So this exercise all the way down, face, head, top of head. A lot of people are getting melanoma on their heads because you don't put suntan oil up there, right? Or suntan lotion or protection. So pumping everywhere and padding pumps our entire immune system. It helps activate it. And that's all part of the vitality enhancement methods. Okay?
What was the pump? This was tapping. What was the other one?
Our major vessels are right here for the lymph system. And then they go throughout our whole body. And so this looks like our heart pumps blood. This is the major system for the lymph nodes. So when we pump, I always ask them to do this more. For guys, okay, pancreatic cancer is your #1 form of cancer. I always say, really make sure, prostate I meant. What did I say? Oh, sorry. Well, that's on the rise for all of us, scary as that is. No mistake, we're wearing them out. But I really encourage both men and women, but especially men, to pump here to keep the lymph system working there. Because like I said, we all get cancer cells here and there, but if we have an optimal immune system, it will take care of it. Okay. Thank you.